Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to go through the interface of the Android Studio IDE. So basically in this tutorial we are not going to write any code, we are just going to go through what things are used for what purpose. So as you could see, we have our main screen over here on which we could edit our Android application. So let me just resize it. And as you could see, if you want to browse through our project, then we have our project right over here. So this is the Project Explorer bar or the Project Explorer tab. So if you want to see what's included in our project, we simply click on this arrow and it is going to display the other folders, which is the manifest. Now if you open up the manifest, then it is going to contain the manifest Android manifest.xml file, which contains the Android manifest. And if we click on Java, then it is going to contain the Java code which we are going to write in order to run our applications. Now if you go here, we will find the resources folder, and the resources folder is basically used in order to store the resources which are required for our Android application. So for example, this drawable folder right here is going to contain the images which we want to store in our Android application. So for example, if you want to include some images into your Android application, we simply load them up in the drawable folder. Now we have one more folder which is called as the layout, and this is going to have two files currently. So the first file is the activity main.xml, which is nothing but the XML file which is going to define the structure of your or the layout of your application. Now we are going to discuss something about the values folder. So the values folder is basically going to contain the values which we are going to store in our Android application. Now one more thing which I wanted to explain is that there are two ways in which you could edit your application or you could program your application. So for example, if you want to design the layout, there is this layout window present right over here which contains various things like the frame layout, the linear layout, or it contains some widgets like the plain text view, the medium text. It also contains the radio buttons, checkboxes. So one thing which you could do is that you could simply just drag and drop these things onto your application. So this is the simplest approach which you could follow, and the next approach is by just using the text. So for example, you could just enter your XML right over here. So instead of just dragging and dropping buttons and text boxes, you could just write the code for them into here. So there are two ways in order to design your layout. So the first method is nothing but you just drag and drop things onto your application and it is automatically going to modify the code for you. And the next approach is by just going into this text and writing the code out for the things like radio buttons and buttons. So it depends upon you which approach you want to follow. So this drag and drop approach is much easier, but the thing is that if we follow this code approach, then it would be much more beneficial for you to understand the XML code which is included in the content mail.xml file. So a few more things which you want to remember is that we have the zoom out and zoom in button. So for example, if the text on your screen is appearing a bit small, then you could just zoom in and you could just edit it out according to your preference, and you could also zoom out and you could see the entire screen. And also, as I've explained in the earlier tutorial, that if you want to include a device frame, so for example in some applications you need to develop and you need to have the frame as well, then you simply click on it and it is going to show you the application on a phone. And if you just click on it again, it is going to remove the device frame for you so that you could see the screen more clearly. So it depends upon your preference, whichever you want to use. If you want to use for application wherein you have to include the phone frame so as to make sure how your application looks on a phone, so you simply click on the include frame button, or for the sake of convenience, if you don't want it, you could just remove it as and when you want. So some more important things which I need to cover is that this button right here is used for running your application onto the emulator. So if you click it, your application is going to load up in the emulator, and this button right here is for the project structure, which is going to basically include the SDK and JDK paths. So if you want to reconfigure this paths for some purpose, you could click on this button directly. Then we have the AVD manager, in which you could create your own Android virtual device. So we are going to go through this AVD manager in the upcoming tutorials, and we are going to learn how you could create your own virtual device. And the main purpose of using this is that if you want to test out your applications on multiple devices, then you could just simply use any of the devices which is included in this, and you could test out how your application works on that particular device. So it basically allows you to test your application on as many devices as you want, so that your application runs on maximum number of devices. So that was a button for the AVD manager. Then we have the SDK manager. So the SDK manager is going to show you the packages which are installed and which are not installed. So for some applications, if you needed some tools, then you could just go ahead and click the application package which you want to install, and just simply click on OK, and that is going to install some packages for you. Now, one of the most important thing about your Android application is that you have two main things, or the two major things in your Android app. The first is your layout, which is nothing but the design which is just like the front end or the front facing things of your Android application. That is nothing but the text box, the screen, the activity, and all those things. And then if you want to write the logic for your Android application, then we move on to this main activity.java file. So if you click on it, you could see the Java code which we have right over here. So this basically has the code which we are going to write. So you could switch in between these two things. So if you want to go on to the content main.xml, you could click on this, and in order to go to the main activity, you click on this button right here. So it allows you to switch between the two as and when you require. So before jumping right into the code, these are the few basic things which we need to cover so as to make our Android learning experience much more better. And that is because we need to understand these things before starting with the code, and that is because we are going to need these things when we start writing our code. So in this tutorial, we have learnt about the interface of the Android IDE or the Android Studio IDE, and we have gone through the various things like the project tab and this tab which contains some things which we could directly drag and drop. We have also learned that we could design Android applications in two ways. That is, we could design the layout of the application in two ways. The first is we could just drag things and drop them directly onto the screen, and another way is we could just simply go ahead and write the code into the XML. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.